Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Jane Ransom, and I'm the Executive Director of the American Brain Foundation. We're just delighted today to introduce you to one of our devoted, committed board members, Marty Shenkman, who is going to provide this program on Financial and Estate Planning 101. Marty is an attorney in private practice in New Jersey and New York, and he practices estate planning for closely held businesses and estate administration. And he's authored over 42 books and more than 1,000 professional articles, more than 50 of which have addressed planning for those facing the challenge of planning with chronic illness and disability. Marty has served on the editorial boards of many tax and estate and real estate publications, and he's got an extensive list of awards. He speaks all around the country, and his charitable work includes founding a website called chronicillnessplanning.org, which educates professional advisors on planning for clients with chronic illness and disability. So without further ado, I'm going to turn you over to our board member, Martin Shenkman. Thank you, Marty.
Thank you, Jane. What we're doing today is we're going to talk about estate planning. I'm going to try to give you an overview of the basics of estate planning. And with that, we're going to mention some of the issues of brain disease, but let me tell you how we're going to do that. And because it's being sponsored by the American Brain Foundation, I think it's important to mention brain disease. But I'm going to use that merely as a indication or example or illustration of how planning should be unique for each of you. So if brain disease is something that doesn't affect you or your loved ones, you may have religious affiliations, and religion may be an important component to your planning. You may have other health issues that may be relevant to your planning. You may have unique family issues. So whatever it is that makes you you, we're going to talk about that. And we'll just use as the example brain disease. Just so you know that I'm a lawyer, for real, there's a disclaimer. And let me just take a second with the disclaimers, because everybody kind of runs through those, but anything I say is really only general. The laws in every state are very different, so be very careful. I know everyone, including me, loves to research things online. If you read a general article, it may give you some good ideas, but be careful that you use things that are specific to your state. And something that I'm going to be sensitive to and talk about is that I'm aware that people have widely different income and wealth levels. So I'm going to try to give you practical points that will help you regardless of where you are on the wealth and income spectrum. So I'm going to try to be sensitive to that as too. I think the most important point, and it sounds very simplistic, but it really is the most important point, is what is estate and financial planning? And first, why am I talking about financial planning if we're doing a program on estate planning? That's because the two go hand in hand. They're fully integrated. If you don't have a financial plan, if you don't have a budget and forecast, no matter how wealthy you are, budgeting is not a four-letter word. It's a wondrous thing. When you're very wealthy, you may not budget the way someone who is on the other end of the spectrum, who's struggling to make ends meet, may budget. They may budget to make sure they meet monthly expenses. On the higher end of the spectrum, you may budget so you can determine what is the largest amount of money I can give to charity every year, or to my children, or to both, without undermining my own financial security. So it can mean a lot of different things, but you need a financial plan to know how to plan for your estate. So they're really tied together. And without assuring financial security, an estate plan doesn't do you much good. And obviously, if you're incapacitated and somebody has to take care of matters for you, or you're bequeathing assets to nieces and nephews or whomsoever, or charity, if you don't have a financial plan, you're never going to optimize that. So they're really integrally related, and we're going to talk a little about each. But why am I defining estate planning? Everyone knows what estate planning is, right? Not really. It's often misdefined. And the problem with the way most people define estate planning is most people tend to talk about estate planning. Oh, I got a will. I don't need to estate plan. I got a will. a will may be important, but for a lot of you on this call or watching this video later, a will may be quite modest in importance because it may not really affect many or any of your assets. It's very common for people to have everything owned in joint name or to pass by beneficiary designation, and there's literally nothing that their will provides for that's relevant other than naming maybe an executor, or if they're younger, a guardian for minor children. So a will may be part of an estate plan, but it's certainly not the only part. And for many of you, it may not be the most important part. So what is estate planning if it's not just the will that many people think of? Take a look at the first bullet point on the top of slide 4. It's a process of providing peace of mind for you and your loved ones, however you define loved ones, because each of us may define that differently. Why such a vague 70s sounding description of estate planning? Because that's really what you want to do. You want to make sure you have peace of mind. If you're successful and wealthy, you may be struggling with health issues. You may have a child with challenges. You may be fortunate enough not to have particular challenges and have dedicated a lot of energy and money to charitable giving, and you want to maximize those benefits. Whatever it is that helps give you and your loved ones peace of mind, that should be, in the broadest, vaguest terms, what estate planning is about. And I think if you start with a broad description, you'll hit things that are really important for you that many don't address because they assume it means a will, a trust, an insurance policy. It means all of those, but it should mean much more if you really want to get results. Second point, and this is just my own sort of take on the world, so forgive me. If it ain't practical and actionable, what good is it going to do, right? So we can have these sort of esoteric philosophical discussions, and I love doing that, about the meaning of life and why I have an estate plan and how much and what to leave my kids and how to leave them money. But if I don't reduce it to actionable steps, I'm not going to accomplish anything. So, dream big, have those philosophical calls and discussions and thoughts, but let's break it down to steps. What I'm going to do in this brief time that we have together is I'm going to talk about specific discrete steps, because I like to be practical, and I want you to all make sure that when you're done with this webinar, you have some discrete specific ideas for you, and it may be different for each of you, that can help make your life safer and more protected and give you more peace of mind. The third bullet point is also very important. Many people it's really, I think, that the biggest problem I have as an estate planner is refocusing people to understand estate planning is not just about planning for death. That is not a lot of fun, and it's kind of not very pleasant to talk about, perhaps part of life, part of reality, but it's also about planning for your life. So if you're young and you're in your 30s, like Jane Ransom, we have to plan for all the many decades you have ahead. And it's important to plan for your life because, longevity is real. Life expectancy, I know there was a blip this year because of COVID, but life expectancy is continued to expand year over year, other than this year because of COVID. And hopefully we'll return to that. And, when a lot of financial advisors, and you should talk to yours, do forecasts or modeling, they'll often, unless you have a specific health issue that is known to shorten your life expectancy, start with something like 95 or 100 years as an assumed life expectancy. So we're planning for what hopefully will be many years and even decades of wonderful life to come. So don't make this a depressing topic you don't want to address. Estate planning done well is empowering. And while you're alive, it's not just for how you're leaving money, it's how to protect your money and protect yourself. So estate planning, the fourth bullet point, is more about life. And here's another big point that I think is often missed. Somebody will go to an attorney and say, please draft a will or a revocable trust or whatever, and think they have an estate plan. That is not it. Somebody may go to their financial advisor who will tell them how to plan for retirement. It's not enough. You may buy a life insurance policy or disability or long-term care policy. It's not enough. You need to integrate. You need to have a collaborative team approach. You need to have a broad, holistic approach where you have an integrated plan that coordinates your investments, your insurance, your emergency planning, disability planning, retirement planning, asset protection planning, tax planning, all of it. Now, If you're well up on the wealth spectrum, you should have an independent CPA, a wealth advisor, probably a trust officer, an insurance consultant, an estate planning attorney, maybe a general and corporate attorney, and have them all talk to each other. That collaborative mechanism is vital. If you're on the other end of the spectrum and you cannot afford to have all these professionals billing you, you may in fact end up using a website online to create certain documents. And I'm not going to have a quarrel with that, because for people that can't afford an attorney, it may be the best option there is, but there's some ways you can mimic what people of greater wealth do. So for example, it almost seems that and you may have to look a little, but many of the large financial advisory investment firms have incredible online resources. Many of them will make a planner available to you for little and sometimes no charge. If you don't afford a CPA, don't need a CPA, your situation is simple, you may use an online service to do your tax return, that's fine, but you got to make sure you address those issues. So wherever you are on the high end, low end of the wealth and income spectrum, you want to make sure you have a holistic plan that addresses all these issues. And that's the key take home point. You'll have to figure out what works for you, but you definitely want to be able to do that. Now, for those that are wealthy, and that's a relative term, and it's relative not only to your neighbors or what you view wealth as, but also to what the gift and estate tax exemptions are. Tax planning is absolutely vital. And right now, while we're doing this, there's considerable uncertainty that the Biden administration may in fact enact significant tax increases. I think it's likely, but we don't have crystal balls. We can't predict it. We're not going to talk about tax planning at all in this program. So if tax planning is important for you, and it very well may be, you need to address it separately. What we're going to focus on is the foundation of a plan that applies to everybody. And just because we're doing this for the American Brain Foundation, as I said in the beginning introduction, I'm going to talk about some of the aspects and considerations for brain disease as an illustration of how planning should be tailored to you for your unique circumstances. And keep in mind, religion, if you're Muslim, if you're Jewish, if you're Catholic, your planning should be similarly tailored for you for those needs as well. And that can and should be done. We're not going to address that. We'll use brain disease as our illustration of tailoring a plan. But again, it should be done for you to meet your goals. Now, the last bullet point on this page, and it's one of the only things in the whole slide deck that I made bold. I don't like to make things bold unless they're really, really important, is really the take-home message of everything I've just discussed. What does estate planning mean for you, right? If you can afford and hire an estate planning attorney, and that's certainly the better option, I believe, make sure you explain what's relevant and important for you. You don't want to go to an attorney and say, I need a will, because that's not telling the attorney anything about you. What are your needs? What are your worries? What keeps you up at night, right? What are your concerns? My wife has been living with multiple sclerosis for almost 14 years. Making sure she's provided and protected for is a big concern of mine. I have a special needs grandchild, big concern of mine, and something I have to address. Those are things that are important to me. You have to communicate to the professionals you work with, all of them. And if you're not able to afford professionals, you're doing it on your own, you got to make sure that your needs, your goals are addressed. And the reason I emphasize that is one of the things that I've seen over 36 years of doing this is it's very common for clients to come in and say, I want to save tax. I haven't met very many people in 36 years that want to pay more tax than they have to. So that's kind of a given. But saving tax is kind of like also, I want to avoid probate. Okay, why? What are you telling me? It's almost an easy out than addressing the real issues. You know, I have a kid that's got mental health issues or a drug problem. You got to tackle the tough issues. So to really get a good estate plan, what does it mean to you? And everybody listening to this video, everyone on this call, each of you is unique. Each of you has your own unique needs and goals and concerns. Now, again, on top of slide 5, that doesn't mean that, you know, one person on this call is going to need a completely different document than somebody else. It doesn't mean you go and find, if you're living with Parkinson's, an attorney specializing in Parkinson's. The planning is very common, right? But it's the tweaks, it's the tailoring to fit your circumstances that really brings it home. Medicaid planning in the middle of slide 5 is another issue many people raise and like to talk about. I'm not going to talk about it. I don't really focus on it. It's not the focus of my practice. But most important for you to all know, the rules are very different state to state. So if you are looking to do Medicaid, or what some people call elder law planning, please get a specialist in your state that deals with that. The rules are very different, and it's also so specialized of a niche expertise that you don't want somebody that, you know, does it 5% of the time. You really want someone that does a lot of it. So let's go on. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break out in 12 steps what I think you all want. And I think the word all is intentional. Whatever your circumstances, whatever your wealth, whatever your health status, however many kids or no kids, whatever your personal situation is, these steps need to be addressed. Now, one of these steps, and again, because our host is the American Brain Foundation, as I've mentioned, I've tailored to them, is what I'm going to very, very briefly go over it. I'm not going to dwell on it because it's just to emphasize the uniqueness of each of you, is how you tailor all the preceding and following steps to you. So that one step is really vital. But again, like I've said, you want to tailor it to you. So it may be religion, it may be financial, it may be brain disease, it may be something else. So let's go through this step by step. Now, before you begin, you got to do some homework. Now, I know folks in America, we love our magic bullets. We love our one-word answers. We love our sound bites. It ain't going to work. It ain't going to work. And if somebody is promising you a half a minute soundbite that will simplify and solve all your tax and estate planning problems, they're probably selling you something that you may not need. Because to do good planning, it takes effort, right? You want to lose weight and get in shape. We all know the answer. You have to eat really well, which takes some work to cook good food. I guess nowadays you can get it delivered in a box, but that's kind of new. And you got to exercise, which takes time. And you got to sleep, which takes time. You got to take care of yourself. You can't get it, you know, by taking a pill. It just doesn't work. Estate and financial planning is no different. There are no magic bullets. You got to do the work. First step. And again, I'm being conscious that many of you may have widely different income and wealth spectrums. The gold standard, if you will, you should have an independent attorney, a CPA, an investment advisor or financial planner, maybe both, an insurance consultant, and you may have others depending on your circumstances. If you have significant health issues, it may include a care manager, and so on. If you don't have the financial wherewithal, you need to keep this in mind, and you need to address the same functions or objectives or disciplines that this team will have. When you do this, you want to demand that your advisors collaborate. Many people get penny wise and pound foolish and don't want the advisors talking. Oh my gosh, you know, the attorney and accountant are going to go both bill me at the same time when they talk to each other. Yeah, but you may save 10 times more money and get a 10 times better result by them communicating. If you need to do this on your own, you need to think holistically. And here's my two beefs. Let me just put it out on the table because I want to, again, be respectful of those that can't afford an army of advisors. If you're going to go online and prepare documents, the documents you can get online are not all that bad for people that can't afford an attorney. The big beef I have with the online services is the following. Please heed my advice. If you're going to go online, and I won't mention any names, there's a whole bunch of these different services that will prepare legal forms. The beef I have with them, they should not let you, for example, prepare a power of attorney unless you first watch and they confirm an hour-long video teaching you what a power of attorney is or more. They let you jump right into a form. They have little dialogue box. I've prepared forms to see how they work, so I would know. Dialogue boxes that pop up. But if you don't have some decent background on what the document is, how it fits into your plan, how conceptually in general, you may want to tailor it, you're not going to know what to do. The second beef I have with the online services, and if they had hired me to do their forms, they would have been simpler, is they try, and I understand why, they try to give lots of options. So whatever it is you think you want, you can get the form to address. The problem is when you're a layperson and you don't have, advanced degrees and 42 books and, 36 years of doing this, it's complicated and you may make the wrong decisions. I think they would do a better service for consumers if they really thought very hard about giving only options that really were necessary for the majority of consumers. So you have to be careful making the decisions. But again, if you can get some training by watching some videos on other online services, maybe they even offer it themselves, get trained. And the second thing to do, if you can't afford professional advisors, get a group together to do it with. So maybe a couple of close friends that have a similar family or wealth situations as you, maybe a couple of relatives, do it as a team. Because the one thing none of us can do, including me, I can't be objective about my own planning. That's why I hire professionals to help me. Yeah, I could do it all, but I can't be objective. You can't be objective about you either. If you have your best buddy from college and he or she does their family's planning while you do it, they can be objective because they see from the outside what you're doing. So get a group of people together. It'll also make it a lot easier. So get trained, get a group to work together with. That's the way to do it if you have to do it online. But everything else that I'm saying, if I'm saying you talk to an attorney and an accountant and you can't afford it, you can mimic it on your own. So if I don't repeat this in the rest of the program, forgive me because I've said it and I think you understand the concept. Now, the last bullet point on slide 7, remember what's unique for you. So again, our sponsor is the American Brain Foundation. So brain disease affects every aspect of estate, financial, and related planning. And it could be different depending on which brain disease you have. Parkinson's versus MS versus young onset Alzheimer's, it could be different. It will be different. So you can't just use standard stuff. But often, and this is the point I made earlier, it's small modifications, I use the word tweaks, to otherwise generic plans that make them ring true for you and do a better job for you. So let me just elaborate at this point, but I won't do it again in the rest of the program. Let's say you have a particular faith and you want to make sure that the documents adhere to the prescriptions of that faith. So if you're Baha'i, you want to have the appropriate preamble to your will. That doesn't mean the rest of the will can't be similar to every other will, right? You will have certain charitable provisions. If you're a Muslim, you want your dispositive scheme to follow the Quran. So you're going to have to modify that provision. But much of the rest of your documents could be very similar. If you're a member of the Church of the Latter-day Saints, you may want to prohibit investments, have a special investment policy statement. So you prohibit investments in things that are drug or alcohol related, etc. So every faith has unique nuances. Doesn't mean all your documents are different. Doesn't mean the planning is radically different. You modify the documents. For brain disease, if you have a disease like multiple sclerosis and are subject to exacerbations that can't be predicted, you want to factor that in. And I'm going to tell you how when we get to that. So again, you need to tailor. So those are some general things. If you have brain disease, if you're a member of a particular faith, you need to explain to whoever you're working with what that is. Don't assume they understand. You need to educate them. So if you have brain disease, talk to your neurologist. Understand what it is you need to communicate about work expectancy for your financial advisor, life expectancy for your financial advisor and estate planner, how it may affect cognition today, and what is the disease course that's anticipated. If you're a member of a faith, how does that affect it? If you have a child with a gambling or other addiction, how might that affect the planning that's being done? So that's the intro. You got to do work. The silver bullets, the magic answers don't exist. It takes effort, but everything that really works well does is two. Now, let's jump into the steps. First step, organize. This is step one for everybody out there. I don't care how wealthy, how poor, you got to organize, simplify, digitize. You got to get it together. You can't go and figure out what kind of planning you need if things aren't organized. If you're living with a chronic disease, as my wife is, simplifying automating your finances is crucial, because as time goes on, chronic illnesses, barring a discovery, which is what the ABF, the American Brain Foundation, is dedicated to funding research on doing. But until such time, somebody on the screen is showing up their organizer. It looks good. There you go. So if chronic disease doesn't get better, so barring a breakthrough discovery, and hopefully we'll all see lots of those in short order, but you want to get things organized and simplified. If you don't have any health issue, you still want things organized and simplified. Makes life easier and safer. And hey, we all face some really significant issues. And if you don't, you will. What are they? Identity theft. 10 years ago, nobody talked about identity theft. Elder abuse, very much a disturbing term. Elder financial abuse. Why does it bother me? Because it's not only the elderly that are taken advantage of financially. It's anybody with any type of infirmity, whether it's cognitive issues, a physical disability, anybody that the vultures out there can take advantage of, they do. And frankly, they take advantage of people who are just working really hard and don't have time to monitor things. You gotta have your stuff organized. Now, what you need to organize, it'll vary a little by person, but you got to deal with everything. Medical information, you got to have all that organized. You got to have a list of all your physicians and their contact data and so on. So for example, in the medical stuff that we organized, we have for each, my wife and I, and we actually have to do one for our pet dog, Eddie, we have a list of all medications and vitamins, so that when we go to a doctor, we can just hand him, here it is. Too much for me to remember. I can't remember it all. And frankly, what I did on that list is I added annotations explaining what each medication or vitamin is taken for. So if I misunderstand or things change when I'm talking to a medical expert, I can not only show them what I'm doing, but I'll know why I'm doing it in case they need to correct what I'm doing. You got to organize it. Everybody should have a list of emergency contacts. I've said it before, but I've yet to do it, so I will fess up. One of the ideas is you put under ICE, in case of emergency, in your phone, and you list, key names, relationships, phone numbers, email addresses. I need to do that. Specific financial information. If you're incapacitated, and that's not an issue because you have a health matter, it's not an issue only because you may be old, it's an issue anyone can face. Stuff happens, right? So you need to have specific financial information in case somebody has to step in, pay bills, or help out. Passwords, get them organized. I cannot for the life of me keep up with passwords. I'm looking into getting one of the password generating softwares so that they can generate random numbers for passwords, and I just have one to sign in. But in the interim, what we've done is we use something called Keeper Security. So it's an app, and you can on our smartphones, you can get it online, and you can put all of your stuff there. And it's not just passwords. It's account numbers, it's passwords, it's the security questions. There's so much stuff. Even if you think your life is simple, if you sit down and write a list of every single account number, your driver's license, passport, social security number, your healthcare insurance card number, the password for your internet at home, the list becomes really long, really quick for everyone. Get it organized. If life throws you a curveball, you need somebody to be able to find that stuff. And by the way, having the best, most costly estate planning documents in the world, if you didn't do all the stuff I just said, how is your agent under a power of attorney or a successor trustee on a revocable trust, and we'll explain all those things, how are they going to help you? They have no idea where anything is. And let me tell you, let's get real for a minute. Dr. Phil, right? We're going to get real. Sit down with a loved one, child, niece, nephew, and whoever your loved one is that you're going to rely on. Have that conversation. If I'm ever incapacitated, here's where my documents are. Here's who you call. Here's where my money is. Do you think in most cases they are going to remember anything you told them? That is not a pleasant conversation, right? That's not the kind of conversation anybody wants to have. In one ear, out the other ear, and it's gone. You got to commit it to either writing. And when I say writing, it could be electronic writing. Legal documents. You got to get together a list of all your legal documents. I will tell you as an estate planning attorney, it is that's a strong very rare that somebody walks into my office as a new client and tells me, here's like, either physical copies or a web domain name or a thumb drive with all their legal documents. I rarely see anyone organized. On the worst end of the spectrum, I have clients that after they've seen multiple attorneys and accountants and financial advisors and they've hopped around, that it could take thousands and thousands of dollars, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars, just to figure out what they have going on and organize their documents. Get it organized. If you don't know what something is, find out. Make your advisors organize it with you. If God forbid you are sick or you die, you want to have all your stuff organized. So if somebody steps in, they don't have to spend 10 grand to get somebody to help them figure it out. You also want to know that if you go to review your stuff, which you should do periodically, because as we all see, the world changes at an incredibly rapid pace. You want to have all your stuff organized so it's less costly to have an attorney or a financial advisor, or both is even better, review your stuff. So get it organized. Financial data, get it organized. Get a balance sheet together. Slide 11 lists some more detail. A couple of comments on slide 11. For many on the call, not everybody, getting a revocable trust together and retitling your documents, not retirement plans, is a great way to protect yourself as you age or have issues. Many people use joint accounts, not getting the problems they create. You got to be very careful. If I have a joint account with one of my children, if I die, my oldest son would get all my money. Is that what I want? I have 3 sons. I have 5 sons. I want it divided equally. Why am I putting everything in one joint account? So joint accounts are sometimes too simple of an answer that create worse problems. Account management. If you have getting on in years, and you'll define what that means. If you have cognitive issues, if you have brain disease, if you have any kind of issues, and even if you don't, at some age, get somebody you trust and have duplicate copies of your monthly financial statements sent to that person, or give them online access. It doesn't cost much. Now, if you can afford it, the best person on the planet, your CPA, right? Trusted advisor. They have the financial acumen to look at stuff. You want somebody watching your back. I recently set up something like that where a older client, she was in her 90s. We got her CPA getting copies of statements. Within a month, he noticed that the home renovation she was doing in her apartment, she was billed 3 times the same bill by the contractor. He called up the contractor and very politely said, "You're going to refund this money, otherwise we're hiring a lawyer." Money came back in. You need to have somebody check. And hey, let's do this in a more pleasant way. Let's say you're so wealthy and you're spending much of your time cruising around the world. Maybe post-COVID, we'll all go back to that, right? Have somebody monitor stuff. Consolidation and simplification. Ask yourself the following question. Is there a reason that I have this particular account? If there's not a legal or tax reason for an account, consolidate it. It becomes just such an albatross where people have so many accounts. Get organized, get things automated, get online payments. The way we personally handle our own finances, anything that we can get billed, and I'll make a plug for American Express. They seem to have the best fraud protection of any credit card company. Anytime we can get something auto billed to American Express, we do it. And then we have all our credit cards automatically paid out of our checking account. So we have very few checks to write a month. Makes things safer and simpler. Doesn't mean we don't monitor them, but if a God forbid happens, or let's even be more, we have a charity my wife and I started. We spend 2 months a year traveling around the country, trying to educate people, professional advisors on planning for clients with chronic disease and in particular brain disease, and we donate all the honorarium to the American Brain Foundation. So we're gone typically. COVID put a wrench in that, unfortunately, but hopefully we'll get back to it, 2 months a year. We don't have much worries while we're gone about getting bills to pay them because it's all on autopilot. Makes life simpler and easier. Budget. Everybody needs a budget. And as I pointed out earlier, even if you're uber wealthy, budgeting can be to help determine how much to give to charity or children, et cetera. It doesn't have to be budget in a negative way. Everybody needs a budget. Investment allocation. What's your time horizon? What's your risk level? Coordinate all that. We're going to skip those details. Now, at the end of each section, I have a checklist. We're not going to talk about any of those. That's just to help you. Because in my view of the world, if you don't write it down, right? If you don't write it down and you don't make a commitment to do it, nothing gets done. So if you watch this whole program and you don't make at least 1 or 2 commitments to get steps to improve your situation, you're not going to accomplish anything. Don't bite off a lot. 1 or 2 steps a month in a year, you'll be in a vastly improved situation. So there's checklists at the end of each chapter. All right, step 2, power of attorney. What's a power of attorney? We're going to skip some of the detail. It's not necessary. You can either deal with this with your attorney, or you can deal with some of the details when you do your own documents the way we talked earlier. Power of attorney is a document in which you designate a person called an agent to take care of legal, tax, and financial matters if you cannot do so. Now, the if you cannot do so could be you become incapacitated and need someone to take care of your finances for the rest of your life. The unable to do so could be you're on a cruise, right? You got your COVID vaccination, you're on the next cruise ship out of Dodge, and you don't want to deal with anything. You just want to go on a cruise because you haven't been on one in 14 months. Well, somebody may need to take care of an IRS notice that comes in. You need a power of attorney. You need to make sure it's, and I'm sorry to give you jargon, but I'm going to give you a little as we go through this, durable. Durable means it lasts even though you're disabled. It's sort of a legal oddity because, of course, you want the power of attorney to be valid when you're disabled. That's why you're doing it. But if it doesn't have the magical language required under your state law that this power of attorney is not affected by my subsequent disability, it may not work. So make sure you get that addressed. And here's a checklist of what to do in the power of attorney. Now, when you're doing a power of attorney, if you don't do all the organization that we talked about in step 1, your agent's not going to know what to do. Doesn't mean you have to give all the information or access to everything to your agent, but they need to know where there is, for example, a basic checking account to pay bills if something happens. You need to discuss modifications to the standard form. So for example, and we'll just use again, if you have religious issues, you're going to modify for that. If you have family business interests, you may modify for that. If you have brain disease, you may want to address how disability is determined. You may want to make the power of attorney effective immediately. You may want to address compensation. Many standard forms and many lawyers routinely provide no compensation. I want my agent paid. I don't want my agent doing me a favor. I don't want to think they're doing me a favor. I want them paid because if they're taking time to do a job, let them be paid for it and give it the full focus it deserves. It's that important. Now, next step, step 3, healthcare documents. Now, forgive me, don't shoot the messenger. I didn't make all this stuff up, but theoretically, there could be one document in which you do all of this. Not the way to go. Can't do that. So you need to have a number of different documents because that's what the legal community, it's how it's evolved. Maybe it's a medical and legal, it doesn't matter. You don't want to be the only cat in town that has a single document doing what 3 documents for everyone else does. You want documents so if you go to a medical provider or you have to ask a legal question, your documents look like everybody else's. It just makes it easier to do, even though it sounds a little more complicated. So don't get upset with me. I'm telling you to do so many documents. It is what it is, and I'm trying to help you with the situation out there. Let's go through what the different documents are first. You need a healthcare proxy. Some people call it a medical power of attorney. A healthcare proxy or medical power of attorney designates an agent to make medical decisions if you can't do so. Everybody 18 and over must have that. If you have adult children or nieces and nephews that you care for, if you have an elderly parent or aunt that you care for, make sure they have a healthcare proxy. Everybody's got to have one. Next document, which everybody should have, and you can probably even get a simple online form for this, is a HIPAA release, Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. Sorry for the long words. What a HIPAA release does is it says, I name Jane Ransom as my agent. Jane has the authority to review my medical records. So you know what? I may be having a medical procedure. I don't need any life and death tough medical decisions made, but somebody may need to interact with the physician while I'm in the operating room or under anesthesia, et cetera, et cetera. So I named Jane. You got to have a HIPAA release. Without a HIPAA release, that person's not going to get access to your medical records. Third document, living will. Living will, and you have to be very careful. A lot of the standard forms are so boilerplate that they could really violate your religious or other personal wishes. But a living will is a statement of your healthcare wishes. And hey, If you have, particular religious restrictions you want to apply, that's important to make known too, right? Everybody that's old enough remembers the Terry Schiavo tragedy. Was she a religious enough Catholic that she wanted a feeding tube, or was she not so religious that she wanted it removed? She was in a vegetative state, and there was a really awful for everybody involved court battle to make that kind of decision. Nobody wants to be in that position. You owe it to all of your loved ones, however you define that term, to make your wishes known. If you're a devout member of a particular faith and you want the strictures of your faith to be adhered to, you got to make it known. If you grew up in a particular faith, but you want to have no religious restrictions on, let's say, the quote unquote pulling the plug situation, you got to make that known. Why should you leave your family to grapple with struggling to figure out what you want? They're going to have enough of an emotionally traumatized time dealing with your illness. Uh, why should you not address that? Um, Burial decisions, all those personal decisions, organ donations, right? So, for example, if you have brain disease, you may really want to be sure that your brain tissue, spinal cord tissue is donated for research to help combat and hopefully find a cure for the very disease you struggled with. You got to make that known. If you're a devout member of a particular faith and you feel that donating brain tissue, central nervous system tissue for research would violate your religious faith, but you still want to do it, say, I'm a member of the ABC faith, and despite that, I want this organ donation to be made for brain research to find, cures for concussion, whatever it is. Put it there. Don't put your family through it. So you need to have, to recap, healthcare proxy naming an agent, HIPAA release naming an agent not to make decisions, just to get information, living will. I tend to do a fourth document, and we'll mention this later when we come to children, to provide for who can make medical decisions for a minor child if the parent or responsible adults are not available. There's also, now I'm blanking on the term, I don't think I have it here. There's another document which is used for end-of-life medical decision making as well. Um, um, I'll think of it and tell you if I think of it. So there could be yet another document. Now, you want to make sure the people you name as agent can do this. The knee-jerk reaction many people will make is, I'll name my siblings in age order, my children in age order. Name who you think can make the decisions you want made. Make the agent the person that has a similar philosophical view of life issue. If you want to name loved ones and you're a devout member of a particular faith, and you want decisions made that are contrary to that faith, and that happens pretty commonly, you got to make sure you're not asking somebody as an agent to make a decision that violates their fundamental religious beliefs. That's not a fair position to put them in. So you need to give some thought to it. Include a guardianship designation in your healthcare proxy. Review what specific rights and powers you have. For example, one of the things that I do is I give the agent the right to move me to another medical facility and even an out-of-state medical facility. The laws state by state vary significantly. I don't want to have a situation where I'm in a particular hospital or in a particular state and the agent can't make the decisions I want them to make. You got to communicate with the agent. The vast majority of people, I believe, when they sign these documents, which is a good thing, don't sit down and have that tough talk with the people they've named agents to let them know what they really want and how they feel. You really need to do that. We're skipping all the checklists. Now, step 4. I'm going to make it a little more generic, even though the focus is children. It could be anyone. You have to provide and think about protecting people that you're responsible or caring about. So the first thing that comes to mind will be minor children. But, we have a very, I'm trying to think of the word, but how we define family in America today is very different than the Cleaver family of days of old, right? I think it's only 20% of family units in America today are intact, what you would call traditional family units of husband, wife, and children. There are more children that are growing up in blended families than children in intact families. In many cases, the family unit is defined in vastly different ways. So when I say protect children, you have to determine who it is that you're protecting. Many people are caring for, to some degree, an older family member, whether it's an older parent, an older aunt or uncle, or just someone that's like an aunt or uncle, right? And we had, when I grew up, Uncle Arthur. He was never an uncle, but he was just such a part of the family. We always called him Uncle Arthur. So you may have somebody like that. Make sure you think of them in your planning. So for example, if you're a parent and you have a health issue, or anybody could become disabled, you need to have a guardian. You need a will to name a guardian. You don't really, in many states, I don't even know if you can appoint a guardian under a revocable trust. So you should have a will at minimum to name a guardian. Power of attorney should not address only payments for you, but payments for children, for minors. If you have a power of attorney, that authorizes the agent to make expenditures for your care. But what about an elderly parent? They're not covered. You need to expressly permit that. So that's something very important for a lot of people. You need to look into insurance and other options. So do you have enough life insurance to provide for the people you're caring for? Are they included in the trust under your will? And do they have provisions for emergency medical issues? So for a minor child, I have what I call, and others have it, an emergency child medical document where the parents designate people like a healthcare proxy for the child. Once the child is 18, they're an adult by the law, and they need to have their own documents. Again, if you have an elderly aunt or uncle, make sure that you're caring for, make sure they have the right documents in place. They need a healthcare proxy, the power of attorney, everything that we said. Now, it may be that because you're wealthier or have more family issues to deal with, your documents more complex. It may be for that family member who has limited resources, you can use much simpler documents, but you need documents nonetheless. If you don't, you're going to end up having to get a guardianship proceeding to help this person. Now, this is really important. Most people, as I said when we started and I was defining what estate planning is about, most people would say, if you have a will, that's an estate plan. We're up to step 5 before really mentioning a will. And that's on purpose. A will is not the priority. It's important for some people, more important than another, but it's not the only step. And hopefully you're already well convinced that you need a lot more than just a will. And you should not define estate planning as a will. Now, everybody knows what a will is, so we can say it quickly, right? A will describes and provides for how your assets are distributed. It names executors who manage your estate. They may be called personal representatives. Different states may have different names. You name guardians for minor children. You could do tax planning. You can create trusts for heirs, and so on. Lots of other things that are beyond the scope of what we need to do. Every adult should have a will. Now, in many cases, what you're going to do is a revocable trust with the will. We're going to talk about that in a second, especially if you have a health issue, whether it's brain disease or any kind of other issue, or if you're getting older. A revocable trust is really, in my view, a better approach, and we'll talk about briefly why. If you do a revocable trust, in many but not in all cases, there's exceptions to everything that I tell you today because everyone's so unique. You may use what's called a pour over will. So in other words, your will may designate guardians, your will may designate executors, and so on and so forth, but then say everything I have in my estate pours into the trust. Now, there's a flip side to this discussion. If you're getting on in years, if you have health issues, you need to not only address your will and what's in it, but your loved one's wills. So you may have Alzheimer's, young onset Alzheimer's. You're concerned about your will and your planning. Great. We're going to talk about a revocable trust in a second. But you probably should also reach out to loved ones. Maybe you have aunts and uncles or parents that named you as an executor under their will. Is that really an appropriate appointment given your diagnosis or other issue? Perhaps they've left you bequests. That's wonderful. But maybe those bequests should be in a supplemental needs trust so that if you're on Medicaid, you don't lose the money that they're leaving you. So it's not just enough, and this is an important take-home point, to look at your will, but to look at any wills from others that may benefit you as well. Now, what's a revocable trust? There's a lot of talk, and if you Google search revocable trust, you're going to get zillions and zillions of hits. Many of them are focused on avoiding the purported evils of probate. There's nothing wrong with avoiding probate. That's not our topic today, but it's not in most cases the big deal that it's made out to be. And often it's just the simple pill that I told you to be careful about. There's lots of other uses for revocable trust. Why do I like revocable trust? Why do I have revocable trust for my wife and I? First, if we get sick, it's, I think, a better tool than a power of attorney. Second, I can have assets. I do have assets in the name of my revocable trust. So an agent under a power of attorney, if I'm incapacitated, has to go to the bank and convince them that the power is valid and they can act. A revocable trust is already in the name of the trust. You don't have to go through that step. So it's a better, safer, less cumbersome tool if you ever have a need for somebody to help you. Another point, I think in our country, we too often generalize about disability in a very negative, incorrect way. Today I'm fine, light switch, tomorrow I'm not fine, I'm disabled. That's how it's dealt with. But that's not reality for most people. Barring suffering a traumatic brain injury or accident, right? You're likely not to be okay today and tomorrow be disabled. More likely what's to happen is it's something that is imperceptible progression over time, right? Aging, you may have periods where you age more rapidly than others, perhaps, but it's more likely to be that little by little by little, month by month, year by year, some of your acumen wanes, some of your capabilities wane, and so on, right? So where is that switch? There is no switch in most cases. So a revocable trust is a better mechanism. It's easier to use. You can have the trust set up today, long before you need it. Name a successor agent. As you feel that you're starting to get on in years or health challenge or other challenges are getting more significant, make a co-trustee with you. So if you need help, somebody can help you, but you're still not giving up control. Yes, and it avoids probate. For many people, a revocable trust, especially if you have an infirmity, brain disease or otherwise, is a great tool to help reduce, in my view, the risk of elder financial abuse, because you can have a monitor, a trust protector involved. It's better because you can have a co-trustee to help monitor you. But what you can also do in a revocable trust is have a separate tax identification number for the trust assets. So if somebody scams your social security number, they didn't necessarily get access to the trust tax ID number. So it's a nice safety step, and I think quite important. So that should be probably part of the planning document arsenal for many on the call, not necessarily everyone. Now, step 7, I'm going to skip through. And I did this because, again, our host was the American Brain Foundation, and I probably listed 7 or 8 different brain diseases and mentioned some of the ways they may affect you and how they may affect your planning or documents. But keep in mind, you know, I heard this said specifically in the context of Asperger's, but it really applies across the board. If you've met one person with Asperger's, you've met one person with Asperger's, because it can manifest so differently. But, you know, my wife's experience with MS can be vastly different than, you know, everyone else's experience with MS. We're all unique. We all have different disease courses. We all have different financial circumstances. We all have different safety nets and loved ones and so on that affect our planning. So you need to tailor your planning. Now, if you have no health issues and that's not on the horizon for you or any of your loved ones, you can skip step 7, but don't. Read it the way I told you earlier. Maybe it's a religious issue. Maybe it's a family business issue. You know, everybody's got their own unique nuances. That's what step 7's about. And I think it's really important. Nobody wants boilerplate, right? Everybody wants their boilerplate tailored for them. So let me just run through them. Migraines, MS, neuropathy, ADHD, Parkinson's, epilepsy, Alzheimer's, stroke, concussion. So those are just some of the brain diseases I've given you some comments on. But again, the take-home message is use that information to tailor it to your specific circumstances. If anyone's watching the clock, I think we got started 5 or 10 minutes late, and I'll be done in about 10 minutes. So we're doing fine. So just hang in there. Now, insurance, review your insurance. I'm not selling insurance. I'm not an insurance salesman, but insurance is incredibly important, very important. And I'm not selling it. But let's define it more broadly. Usually when someone starts talking about insurance, you think, oh, they're trying to sell me life insurance. And that may not be a bad thing. That may be a very good thing. But let's take a really broad view of insurance, because insurance is absolutely critical to everybody, wherever you are, however rich or poor, however high income or low income, everybody needs insurance, just you need it right for you. Property and casualty coverage. So if you have a health challenge, you want to make sure that you have adequate coverage that addresses what if you get in a car accident, right? What if a home health aide is living in your home? Is that covered? If you have a business, is that covered? Long-term care coverage is very small percentage of the American population has long-term care coverage. Very important. Now, you can self-insure and provide that if you have enough savings, address it. I think it's a great exercise to apply for long-term care coverage, and I'm not selling it, and just learn about what it can and can't do. You may decide after you see the numbers that it's not for you or not affordable, but look at what needs it covers. How else will you meet the needs that long-term care coverage provides for if you don't have it? Now, if you have a good answer to that question, then don't buy it. If you have a so-so answer, maybe you should consider it if you can afford it, but look into it. Disability, if you're in your 30s or 40s and you have a family and you're working, or even if you don't have a family, God forbid you're disabled, and don't forget the risk of disability is like 4 or 5 times the risk of death at many younger ages. How are you going to pay for things if you don't have disability coverage? When you get older and you've saved for retirement and you're closer to retirement age, you may choose to drop your disability coverage. If you're doing tax planning and shifting a lot of wealth into irrevocable trust, you may want to goose up all of your insurance coverages. Life insurance. And now let's say you have a health issue and you can't get life insurance. Does that mean my discussion doesn't apply to you? No. You may have existing insurance. You may have a term policy that you can convert to a permanent policy and didn't even know it. Look into it. If you have a permanent policy and you don't need it, you feel, or you can't afford it, don't just let it lapse. Talk to an insurance consultant. Maybe you can sell it into the secondary market. Everybody on this call needs liability protection. Everybody. We have a very litigious society. Politics in Washington aside, I don't really care who's in office, who's not. That's just, and I'm not saying it's good or bad. It's just part of the American culture. That's our society. Everybody has to have liability coverage. And frankly, what I see a lot of people do is have coverage that's too inadequate with a low deductible because they think, oh, gee, I don't want to be out of pocket more than $250. $250 is not going to bankrupt you. But if you have 500,000 of coverage and you get sued for $1 million, you can lose everything you have. So go through all these coverages. You need to do it periodically. If you have specific issues, whether it's a family business, a health issue, make sure your coverage is tailored to address that. Step 9, beneficiary designations. I've had clients over the years come to me anxious to get a new will. And when I go through their balance sheet, which is what you should all do before you sit down with an attorney to get a will done, and I look at it, they may have a house-owned joint with their spouse. They may have a big IRA with the bulk of their money in it, and they have beneficiary designations. They have a life insurance policy with a beneficiary designation, and they have a checking account. The only thing that may affect their will or be governed by their will may be the checking account. And if that's joint with a spouse, they may have zero assets that their will relates to or has an impact on. The beneficiary designation is critical. So I don't want to belabor it, but everybody's got to make sure that their beneficiary designations are current and reflect what they want. You also have to be very mindful. You may have great trust for children under your will, and then you leave them the IRA, which is the bulk of your asset, and the insurance, which is most of the rest of your wealth, outright. Why? Oftentimes, and this is a big oversight by a lot of people, people make out beneficiary designations because they fill them out with a clerk at the bank or an insurance assistant, after the policy is purchased, and they don't put trusts for these things. You need to think of the people you're providing for. So make sure your beneficiary designations are consistent with your estate plan. We're not getting into taxes, but if you have a large IRA or retirement plan, the Secure Act at the end of 2019 became effective 2020. If you haven't reviewed your IRA retirement plan beneficiary designation since that was enacted, call up your attorney, do it ASAP, or your financial advisor, better call both. You got to relook at everything. It's changed the game. Now, just like I said with the will, let's say you have a brain disease and you have challenges or concerns. What have your loved ones done in terms of their beneficiary designations for you, right? Now, Post-Secure Act, it may be that because you qualify as disabled under the law, you may get a stretch IRA, that a stretch payment availability on an IRA that's a very big tax benefit. It may be that if you get if you're named directly as a beneficiary under a life insurance policy from an aunt, an uncle, a parent, if you get it outright and you're on Medicaid, you're going to lose all that money. It should be really a supplemental needs trust for you. So you got to look at the flip side of what others are doing for you. Now, step 10. This is different. This is the Marty view of the world. So if this is something you haven't heard, this is sort of my perspective on it. And I kind of think it makes sense. And this is to me why when we started talking in the beginning of our conversation about an hour ago, I said, this has got to be what works for you. Everyone's got to think about it. I mentioned those philosophical conversations. I think giving back is absolutely vital for every single person. Healthy, unhealthy, rich or poor, we all can find ways to give back. And I really believe that if we all gave back to the maximum we could, we would change the world very quickly. I think giving back is an incredible way for each of us to feel good about what we do. Whether it's giving money to charity, making bequests under your will, volunteering your time, giving back is to me the essence of human nature and what makes us great. And I think any kind of estate and financial plan that doesn't factor in giving back is missing one of the most wondrous benefits that we personally can receive. So I think that should be factored into everybody's plan. Step 11. Here's something that nobody talks about, pun intended. I'm sorry, but doing the best estate plan in the world and then having all the documents in a vault somewhere, it's not going to cut the mustard. You got to communicate. If you're leaving money to people, if you talk to them in advance about the inheritance, maybe you should even be helping them now to acclimate them to the wealth if it's significant. If you named an agent to make healthcare decisions, how can they make decisions if you don't communicate to them how you feel about religious issues, life and death issues, healthcare issues? I can tell you that if there's an experimental medical treatment, I want it, right? If there's something, if I'm unhealthy and I have a challenge, go for it. I want to stick around and have as much fun and be around as long as I can. I have a lot of fundraising to do for Jane, so I can't go anywhere fast. So I got to keep ticking. You got to communicate. You want someone to be an agent under a power of attorney to make financial decisions. They have to know who's your broker, who's your financial advisor, who's your wealth advisor. Who do I call? What do I do? Where are your accounts at? How do you feel about giving gifts to charity and to your children? You got to communicate. Communication is so vital. It just doesn't happen often enough. And the reason it doesn't happen is these are not fun topics, right? Wouldn't you rather talk about the Super Bowl than about who takes care of your finances and where your money is if you're incapacitated? Of course you would, even if you don't like football. But you got to do it. To make your planning really practical and functional, you need to communicate, even if it's uncomfortable. Now, I'm not telling you have to call up your kid. Hey, kid, I'm worth X millions of dollars, and when I croak, you get it. It may be, listen, son, I know this is an unpleasant conversation, but I need 15 minutes of your time. Here's what happens. If I'm incapacitated, you're my agent. This is the name of my lawyer. Here's where all my papers are. Here's where my accounts are. Jane, my broker, is my key financial advisor. Call her if there's an issue. I'm going to give you her phone number. You got to have those basic discussions with people. And you can't just do it once and forget about it, because 5 years later, no one's going to remember. Now, step 12, and this is another Marty. People think I signed my will, I have an estate plan. Folks, the last year in this planet of ours, between COVID, the stock market, everything going on, nothing stays the same for very long. Whatever you think's going to happen, something different seems to happen. Whatever you project to be doesn't turn out. The world is incredibly dynamic. I can't tell you how many times I get a phone call from somebody. I don't even remember their name. I did a will for them 25 years ago. Well, what good is that? It's remote, highly unlikely that a document that's more than 10 years old is really going to work. It might, but why don't you review it? Can anyone honestly say their financial situation is the same now as it was 5 or 10 or 20 years ago? Probably not. Probably not. Is anybody's family situation the same today as 20 years ago? Probably very unlikely. You need to review. Once you think you've really finished the process we've talked about, you don't put it on a shelf and let it get dusty. You got to redo it. But the beauty of redoing it, every time you go back and review, it gets more understandable by you and the people that need to help you. It gets less and less costly to do because you and your advisors, whoever's working with you, understands better what it is. And then when you need to make a change, you're ahead of the curve. You're proactively making changes. It's so tragic to wait until somebody is on death's door or has a major health impediment that makes it so difficult for them to sign a document to then address this. If you keep your stuff current and one of those God forbids or unexpected twists in life happens, right? Life always throws curveballs. Um, you're ahead of the game, much easier. And on slide 59, everything changes. Nothing remains the same. So to me, one of the key 12 steps is reviewing and revisiting your planning. Now, let me go back. So to conclude, and you see, and I told you in the beginning, I like practical, I like actionable items. I want people to write something down, just 1 or 2 items a month, 1 item a month, 1 item every other month. If you agree to take off bite-sized pieces and you got checklists throughout the PowerPoint, which the ABF can make available to you, you can use this, go talk to your advisors, make a commitment to do at least one thing a month until you have nothing else to do, which will never happen because by then you're going to review it and the world's changed again. But if you take little bite-sized pieces of this and do it, a year from now, you will look back and say, wow, I am really in much better shape. I'm much more confident. And you know what? We talk in our country about, the advertising in our country, and I don't want to pick on advertisers. I don't want to offend anyone, but if you get this new piece of jewelry, this new car, this new diet, whatever, then everyone's happy and everything else. The ultimate luxury item, the ultimate luxury is not the new car or the fancy shoes. Forgive me, all of you. I don't mean to offend anyone. It's financial independence. What we just talked about, from the financial planning, the estate planning, that's what gives you independence. That is the ultimate luxury. Everything else is quite secondary. If you know when you go to sleep at night, I don't have to worry, I've got everything I can reasonably do done, it's a great feeling. And that's what I wish for all of you. And the way to get there is what I say on the top of slide 61, act now. The second bullet point, which I know is redundant to the fourth bullet point, on purpose, you got to do what works for you. Everybody's different. Everyone has different financial situations, different family, different goals, right? You got to do what works for you. If you have a health issue, again, acknowledging the ABF, the American Brain Foundation, disease can disempower, but proactive planning can empower. So take advantage of it. So I hope this was helpful. I hope it was practical. I hope it motivates you all to take action. Call your advisors, make a commitment, get a friend, right? When you want to lose weight, you get a couple of friends and you all commit to lose a pound a week or something. So you're all watching each other. Get a group of friends, get a group of family members, commit to go down the path together, help each other. It's a great way to keep everyone on the straight and narrow towards a better plan.